left religion, church, and fundamentalism, I realized that the church teaches men and women that manhood, masculinity, has to look one way. We call it a gender role. But these gender roles are toxic. The gender role expectation is toxic. Even if the person's personality, creativity, likes and desires match up perfectly with the gender role expectation, the gender role expectation is still toxic. Because if that person ever changes, evolves, grows, that pressure will always be on them to not change. We need to look at gender as a spectrum. One size does not fit everybody. There are different shades of womanhood, manhood, or whatever is in between. We need to stop looking with our eyes and instead focus on what is beneath the skin. Because when I meet people, I don't have a default setting that says everyone's male or female. I don't have an opinion about what people are unless they tell me. I can speculate. I can say, I wonder if this is what they are. But that's a theory. I never expect men to look like one type of person. And just because somebody is loving and have traits that are traditionally viewed as feminine, I don't expect that person to be a female. Any more than if you heard terms like aggressive, pursuit, independent, a go-getter, outspoken, you would immediately think it was a man. You probably wouldn't think it was a woman because those aren't feminine traits, even though millions and billions of women and girls have those traits. Women are punished for having masculine traits. And men, they're punished if they have feminine traits. Loving, caring, maternal, in touch with their feelings, vulnerable. These are feminine traits, even though they shouldn't just be identified with femininity. All gender, all orientation, they should all have the ability to tap in to any of these traits, behaviors, because anyone who is emotionless and don't have compassion and empathy, those are the traits that society expects of men. But people who do that, they're not going to be the best partners out there. Personally, if somebody is not in touch with their feelings, is emotionless without compassion and empathy, that's a major red flag for me. I mean, I will not be friends with these people. I learned in therapy that somebody being comfortable, open, and vulnerable is not a feminine trait. It's a human trait. This is why we have conversion camps, which are awful. If a boy doesn't sit the right way, dress the right way, talks in ways that aren't identified as conservative masculinity, they think you're gay. I mean, gay people are all one type of person. It's stupid. They believe that if a woman doesn't dress in a certain way, behave in a certain way, and have specific expectations, which are marriage, children, in a nuclear family, then this person is not feminine, or a warped, unnatural version of femininity, which is stupid. 45% of women in America just don't want kids. And it's not because they don't have the passion. Sometimes that's true. Most of the reason is they can't afford one. They don't know any mature, decent man to have one with. They don't have the time because our economy doesn't allow them extra money or extra time to focus on having kids. Our society punishes women for having children. We have no maternity leave. We have no mandatory pregnancy assistance. I mean, our federal caregiving funds have been cut by Trump. Our country does not reward anyone for having a baby. It just doesn't happen. And if it rarely does, it's not a consistent, federally commanded thing. Even in church, the more masculine and more toxic masculinity you resemble, the more likely you will get a position of senior leadership. Do you think they want and I don't even like saying this, but according to toxic masculinity, any man who's in touch with their feelings, is vulnerable, and talks in a way that conveys their inner goings on, they're declared effeminate, pansies. They're not going to choose those men to be spiritual leaders. They won't. There are progressive churches that might, but it's not mainstream. Men have to be the toxic version of masculinity. They have to be leaders, even if they're not qualified, experienced, or have a clue in their brain how to be a leader. You don't get to be in charge because you're a man. And if you choose someone because they're quiet, submissive, and they're a virgin, that's just cringe. Ew. That's not what you should be bringing to the table of any relationship. Compatibility is what's important. We live in a society that believes that men should be fixed if they're not emotionally avoidant enough. If someone can guess what emotions you're feeling, that's not masculinity for a lot of people. And it's dangerous. We have more and more sociopaths in America because men grow up in a world where boys don't cry. In some circles, they think girls don't poop either. It's weird. Everyone cries. That doesn't make you more or less masculine. It just makes you human. And if we live in a society that only respects and values men if they are Christian Grey, which is a red flag example of manhood, by the way, we are probably doomed for our generation unless we do a complete 180. Masculinity in most movies, books, and television shows is extremely toxic. There are a few good examples of masculinity, but they don't win Academy Awards. One of my favorite healthy versions of masculinity was Newt Scamander from The Fantastic Beasts, the prequel series of Harry Potter. And yet, men like Newt don't win Academy Awards. They're not used as an example for masculinity. Even though it's one of the most healthy versions of positive, healthy masculinity. And men are so out of touch, they don't even know what the average woman wants. Alpha males, men in general, think women are attracted to very muscled, chiseled bodies, when most women are attracted to men who are more in touch with their feelings. There's a reason why women like guys like Timothy Chalamet. Men don't have a clue what women mainstream find attractive. And what's sad is men beat themselves up. They utterly change their diet and their body shape to conform to a standard that 85% of women won't choose off the gun. The average woman out there, and I read this in a scientific review on YouTube, most, like 4 out of 5 women will choose somebody who has little to no muscle on their body. And yeah, there are women out there that really like muscular types. But the average woman who's 18 to 45, they want somebody who has maybe a 4-pack at the max. That's just how women are. And every country's different. But the red pill, the manosphere, they have no clue what women want. Because they've probably never asked enough women to get a consensus. And women are the same way. They don't know what men want. They know what the male gaze wants, but that's not the same thing as knowing what healthy or decent masculinity wants. And our society is so messed up that they teach men to be something that 85% of women will not choose. Or probably won't choose. Because that's not what the majority of women on the planet find most attractive. And if you're not the toxic version of masculinity, which, I mean, very few men on the planet reach the apex of being an alpha male, it does terrible things to your mental health. And there's more of a likelihood of domestic violence and femicide because it comes from a place of toxic masculinity. If people were just themselves, with no image, no circumvention, no lies, our relationships would end in divorce much less. If people didn't put on a front and were honest and didn't care what people thought, there would be fewer bad relationships in the world. If society just didn't put up with toxic masculinity, which I don't think will happen for quite a while, because the last election taught us you can be the worst man on the planet, but if you're white, they'll still vote for you. That's why misogyny is so big and has gotten bigger in the last 10 years. Men seem to gravitate more in this decade to right-wing white supremacy than being liberal and woke, because it does more for their masculinity, at least the toxic version, than it does being a liberal, proud person who doesn't need religion, politics, and ideology to make up for what they lack or what they think they lack, even though nobody lacks really anything except a little self-confidence and some hygiene. But religion does very little to teach men what good masculinity looks like. Good healthy masculinity doesn't mean you're in charge. It doesn't mean you're a leader. It means that you care enough about other people's feelings that you can read the room. You're a safe place for vulnerable people. You don't insist upon yourself and make other people uncomfortable. You don't humiliate your dates or think you own or entitled to women's bodies. That's what healthy masculinity is all about. Being what is the complete opposite of what you see on most billboards. We would have less crime, fewer murders, fewer assaults. We would have a better mainstream relationship dynamic if men acted like who they really were and didn't put on a front. And our society just needs to stop telling men that acting like a woman is a bad thing. If we really valued womanhood, homophobia would not exist. Because if you really respect women and really enjoy being around feminine people, it wouldn't matter who acts feminine. People would rather somebody has integrity and lives and acts the way they really are. than forcing and making fun of people who can't or won't fit into an outdated, stupid gender expectation.